evening. I'm Sharon Wyatt from Chicago Public Library's Civic, Cultural, and Literary Engagement Team. Welcome to our Knowing Your Rights and Improving Your Credit program. This program is part of our Law at the Library live events hosted by the Chicago Public Library and Evanston Public Library. We want to help patrons understand the complicated nature of legal information better by providing reputable experts to lecture on legal topics and address questions. The Chicago Bar Association is presenting this program. Thank, we want to thank them for giving their time to educate the public on this important issue. Today, we're pleased to welcome Alan Ritchie and Margaret Hayes to talk about consumer law. After the conversation, we'll take questions from the audience. So we invite you to leave your comments and questions in the Q&A or chat box. Please join me in welcoming Alan and Margaret.
Thanks, Sharon, and thanks so much to the Chicago Public Library, the Evanston Public Library, and the Chicago Bar Association for putting this on. As Sharon mentioned, there is a chat box as we're going along here. Feel free to put any questions you have in there. We'll do our best to incorporate them and answer them along the way. We'll also try to answer them in the text box if we can. Of course, we'll try to leave a little time at the end of our presentation here to answer any remaining questions. As Sharon mentioned, my name is Alan. I'm joined by my colleague, Margaret Hayes. We work for a law firm in Chicago called Pilgrim Christakis, where our practice focuses on consumer financial services. Now, it wouldn't be a panel of two lawyers on it if we didn't start off with a legal disclaimer. So let me just get this out of the way. The information we'll be providing during this presentation and on these slides does not and is not intended to constitute legal advice. Instead, all information, content, and materials are for general information purposes only. All right, we've got that out of the way. So let's talk about cleaning up credit. I'm going to start off by talking about credit reports. What is a credit report? Where can you get a copy of your credit report? What information is contained in a credit report? Why do we even care about our credit report? And ways to improve it. Margaret is then going to talk about credit scores, what a credit score is, how it's calculated, why we care about our credit score, and ways to improve it. She's also going to talk about debt management and provide some tips and tools for how to deal with debt. And then I'll close things out by talking about tips for avoiding scams related to debt relief and credit repair. And then if we have some time, I'll touch a little bit on identity theft, some ways to try and prevent it, and what to do if you suspect that it's happened to you. So let's jump into this with credit reports. Typically when we're talking about cleaning up your credit, in large part, we're talking about cleaning up your credit report. So what is a credit report? Well, in its most simple terms, it's a file that contains information about you and your credit history. These are provided by the consumer reporting agencies, the three major ones you've probably heard of: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And typically what these consumer reporting agencies do is they compile information about a consumer into a file or a document. We call it a credit report. And then they sell that information to companies that have a legitimate need to see it or use it. So why do we care about our credit report and what's in it? Well, credit reports are used by potential lenders and creditors to help them decide whether to offer you credit, and if so, on what terms. So how much money they may lend you, what your credit limit may be, what the interest rate may be. So certainly a credit report impacts your ability to obtain credit. It may also impact your ability to obtain insurance. Insurance companies look at credit reports. It could also impact your ability to obtain housing. Landlords will often look at your credit report before deciding whether to offer a lease and on what terms to offer that lease upon. And then finally, it could impact your ability to obtain employment. employers often will look at credit reports when making their hiring decisions. So obviously incredibly important and something that you want to be familiar with and constantly look at. You can go to the next one, Margaret. So what type of information is actually contained in a credit report? Typically, if you were to pull your credit report right now, you're going to see 4 categories of information. The first is personal identifying information. So this will be your name and any aliases you may go by. If you have a maiden name, for example, it'll also include your date of birth, social security number, your current and former addresses, your current and former places of employment. And typically that personal information will be contained at or near the top of the credit report. The next section, which constitutes the vast majority of any credit report, is credit history. And so this is going to show all of your current and past credit accounts. An example of a credit account would be a credit card. It could be a personal loan, it could be an auto loan, it could be a mortgage, any of those types of credit accounts. And for each account, there's going to be a ton of information listed. But for our purposes, thinking about balances, credit limits, payment histories, which go back several years for each account. It'll also list your monthly payment for that account and whether or not the account is in good standing or past due. And if the account is past due, it'll list how delinquent that account is and what is owed to bring the account current. So we've got your personal information, we've got credit history. The third category of information that you'll find on the credit report is what's known as credit inquiries. And basically what a credit inquiry is when a third party, a lender, a creditor, an employer, a landlord, pulls your credit report and looks at it when making a decision about credit or employment or housing. It's going to leave a mark, an inquiry on your credit report. And there are 2 different types of credit inquiries that you'll see on a credit report, and they'll be separated out into these 2 categories. The first is what we call a hard credit inquiry. Typically, a hard credit inquiry is the result of a credit application, a complete credit application. So this would be when you're, for example, if you're applying for a credit card, right? You submit your personal information, you've got to provide your proof of income, proof of employment, you submit the whole package, and the credit card company either approves you for a credit card or denies it. But when the credit card company is reviewing your application, they will pull your credit report, and that will leave a hard inquiry on your credit report. Typically, a hard inquiry will remain on your credit report for 2 years. And as Margaret will touch on in a little bit, a hard inquiry will actually affect your credit score and negatively. So the more hard inquiries that appear on your credit report, the higher the negative impact is on your credit score. So the lower your credit score is going to go. The second type of inquiries that will show up on a credit report is called a soft inquiry. Now these can result from several different types of reviews. The most common being a request for pre-qualification, which isn't quite like a full credit application. This is when you may just submit some simple personal information to a potential creditor, oftentimes through their website, just to see if you qualify for a product. Because it's not a full credit application, it doesn't result in a hard inquiry. Instead, it's just a soft inquiry. Another common example is promotional inquiries. I'm sure everybody listening to this panel right now has received something in the mail that says you're pre-qualified for this loan or this auto loan or refinance. Typically what has happened is the company that sent you that has performed a soft inquiry. They've looked at your credit report to determine whether you would qualify or not. And then they've sent out that promotional inquiry, that advertisement to you. And then the third most common example for these soft types of inquiries would be an account review. And that is, let's say you've got an auto loan account with an auto loan lender. They may periodically pull your credit report just to see how you're doing with your other accounts, make sure everything's going okay with you. And so those will also show up as a soft inquiry. Now, soft inquiries will typically only stay on your credit report for about a year. And unlike hard inquiries, they do not affect your credit score at all. So there's no negative effect. You can have as many soft inquiries as you want on your credit report. And then finally, the fourth category of information that you'll find on a credit report is public records. And the best way to think about what public records would show up on a credit report is anything that is filed in connection with a lawsuit or it's filed with the county recorder. So common examples would be bankruptcy cases, foreclosures, tax liens, any judgments that have resulted from a lawsuit or a collection suit, and criminal records, so arrests and convictions. Now, recently, some of the major consumer reporting agencies have come out and said that they are not going to include criminal records on credit reports going forward, but they certainly could. So it's a possibility that you'd see that on a credit report. Okay, Margaret, we can go to the next one. Thanks. Okay, so we know what a credit report is. We know why we should care about it, and we know what information is on it. Where can you get a copy of your credit report? Well, the good news is you can get a free copy, but every person is entitled to one free credit report from each of the three major credit reporting agencies. So again, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, every 12 months. That's the general rule. Now, in response to COVID, Congress passed something that's called the CARES Act. You may have seen it in the news. It provides a whole host of relief related to COVID and the pandemic issues. But one of the things that's important for our panel here tonight is that it provides every person the right to receive one free credit report from each of the three major consumer reporting agencies every single week. So no longer do you have to wait, an entire year to get another free credit report from Experian. You can get one from them every single week, and Equifax and TransUnion. Now, the last I checked, that provision of the CARES Act is set to expire at the end of this year. We'll see if it's extended, but for now, you should know that you can get your credit report for free from each of the three major bureaus every single week until at least the end of the year. Now, this is helpful because if you pull your credit report from Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, it's not going to be the same credit report. There might be little differences here and there. And that's because some furnishers don't report to every single credit bureau. Some might report only to one or two, or maybe all three of them. And each of the credit bureaus has their own way of processing information that comes in and their own way of displaying information on the credit report. So there are differences. But under the CARES Act, because you can get a free one every single week from all three of them, it's much easier to kind of stay on top of those differences and see what's appearing on each of your three major reports. So where can you go to get your free report? Well, the easiest way is by going online to annualcreditreport.com. I've included the link in the slides. It's a simple to use website. You click a few links, put in your information, and you will be able to access your free credit reports from all major bureaus. Now, if you're not as technologically inclined, which I doubt is true, you're listening to this panel on Zoom, so you've got to be somewhat good at it. You can always call the bureaus, or you can request a copy of your credit report from them through the mail. And if you just Google Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, all of that information will be listed on their website of where you can send your request and which numbers you can call to ask for your free credit report. Now, there's always the option to purchase one. So if for some reason you're going to exceed your allotment of free credit reports, you can always purchase one from one of the major bureaus. Typically, the fee is like $10 to $15, so it's not too expensive. But of course, we would suggest going the free route unless you like to spend money. I don't know who does, but you can always purchase one. And then finally, just to quickly throw this in there, if you've applied for a credit product and were denied that credit product, the company that you applied with typically has to send you what's called an adverse action notice. It's a fancy way of saying a denial letter. And in that denial letter, they have to include certain information, including the reason why you were denied. And then they also need to identify the consumer reporting agency in which they pulled your credit report from, again, Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion, and provide their contact information. And if you receive one of those letters, you can request from the consumer reporting agency a free copy of the credit report that was used in that decision. And that does not count against your allotment of free credit reports for the year or for the week under the CARES Act. Mario, we go to the next one. Okay, so we've talked about what a credit report is, what's contained in it, where to get one, and now you've got it in front of you and you're looking at it. What can you do to improve your credit report? Well, the first thing you should do is look for any inaccurate or incomplete information on your credit report. For example, you may be looking at the account section and you notice that the balance on your auto loan is incorrect, or maybe the credit limit on one of your credit cards is not correct. Maybe the payment history is off. Maybe your credit report says that you missed a couple payments last year, but you know that you didn't miss those payments. What do you do in that situation? Well, you can dispute any inaccuracy or incomplete information with the consumer reporting agencies. And must do that in writing. Now, you can submit a dispute online. Again, Googling any of the 3 major bureaus will take you to their website, and they'll have some easy links to follow if you'd like to submit a dispute. Or you could submit a dispute by mail. Typically, we would suggest doing that by certified mail just to confirm that the consumer reporting agency has received it. There's no general rule on what you need to put in your dispute, but the more information, the better. So typically, what you want to include in any dispute is identify the information, of course, that you think is inaccurate or incomplete and why you think it's inaccurate or incomplete. And then include copies of any documents that support your position. So going back to my example, let's say you're looking at your credit report, and under the payment history of one of your accounts, it says that you missed a payment in March of last year. But you have a receipt that shows that you submitted your payment on time in March of last year. That would be something that you'd want to attach or include in your dispute. It's also helpful to include a copy of the credit report that you're looking at, and I mean, literally with a pen, you can go in and highlight the information that you are disputing that you think is inaccurate or incomplete. When the CRAs, when the consumer reporting agencies receive your dispute, they're obligated to investigate it within 30 days. They're also obligated to forward along your dispute and any information that you provided to the furnisher of credit. The furnisher of credit, again, is the lender, the credit card company, or the auto loan company that is providing information about you and your account to the consumer reporting agency. Once the furnisher receives the dispute from the consumer reporting agency, they also have a duty to investigate it. And then they have to report their results back to the consumer reporting agency. If the furnisher finds that the information really was inaccurate, then they need to respond to the consumer reporting agencies confirming that. And if, and then the consumer reporting agencies will update your credit report by correcting that information. If the dispute results in a change to your credit report, then the consumer reporting agency, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian, must give you the written results from your dispute and a free copy of your credit report. And again, this doesn't count against your free copy allotment. If you request it, the consumer reporting agencies must also send notices of correction to anyone that had received your credit report within 6 months. And if it was an employer, it's actually 2 years. So this is very beneficial if the dispute goes your way. Now, if the dispute does not result in a change, so let's say you submit the dispute to the consumer reporting agency, they forward it to the furnisher checks their information and they say, no, it looks accurate to us. You can ask for a statement to be included on your credit report that the account is disputed. And you can also ask that a statement of your dispute be sent to anyone who recently received your report. So just like I mentioned earlier. So even if the dispute doesn't go your way, you can still have the report reflect that you've disputed it, and you can still have anybody that's looked at your credit report informed that you disputed that information. Now, in addition to submitting your dispute to the consumer reporting agencies, you can also submit a dispute directly to the furnisher. Again, that would be your lender or credit card company. Again, your dispute would need to be in writing, so you'd want to do it online or through mail, and you want to include any information that supports your dispute. If the furnisher continues to report your account while that dispute is pending, so before they've issued a decision on that dispute, they've got to mark it as disputed. So again, this just tells anybody that's looking at your credit report that you are disputing this information. Okay. Now, if you're looking at your credit report and you notice that there's information on there that appears to be negative, but it's accurate, right? Let's say you had trouble making payments on one of your accounts for whatever reason, but it's accurate, right? You didn't make your payments and the report reflects that. What can you do about that? How can you get rid of that negative information? Well, unfortunately, there's no way to snap your fingers and get that erased. And what you need to do is just wait until that information falls off the credit report. Typically, most negative information will fall off your credit report within 7 to 10 years. And when I say negative information, that's late payments, collection cases, foreclosures, bankruptcies, things like that. So they stay on there for quite a while, which is certainly, makes it all the more important to try and avoid those negative things, make your payments on time, avoid bankruptcies, avoid foreclosures, and things like that. But if they do appear on there and they're accurate, it's a waiting game. And you can continue to work on your other accounts and make sure they're up to date, make sure you're making payments on them. And then 7 to 10 years later, that negative information will fall off. And then finally, another tool to try and improve your credit report would be in a scenario where you've applied for credit but were denied because of an insufficient credit file, or you don't have any credit, or you don't have enough credit. And you actually have some accounts with other creditors, but they're just not appearing on your credit report. One thing you can do is ask the consumer reporting agencies to add those positive accounts that weren't previously reported. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. The consumer reporting agencies, they're not obligated to add those. Your creditors aren't obligated to report any information about you. It's a common misconception that people have that if you open up a credit account and you're making payments on time, that they must report this information about you so it helps your credit score. They don't. The only duty or obligation they have is if they decide to report it, it's got to be accurate. So this is something you can do. It's not certainly guaranteed, and sometimes the consumer reporting agencies will charge a fee for it. And so at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Margaret to talk about credit scores and dealing with debt. Go ahead, Margaret.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, everyone. My name is Margaret Hayes. Just diving right in to follow Alan. He just talked to you about credit reports. Credit scores are something separate, but also another thing that lenders will look at when assessing whether or not you qualify for a loan or any other type of credit. A credit score is a number between 300 and 850, and there's a number of things that go into calculating it. The credit score and how to calculate it was developed by FICO, and that is a company that specializes in something known as predictive analytics. Essentially, they figured out an algorithm that lenders can use or rely on to predict someone's likelihood of paying their debts on time, or predict their behavior and how they spend their money or how they pay off their debts. So, as I mentioned, the credit score is just one thing that lenders will consider, including the credit report, and also separately, lenders will consider your credit application. So focusing on your credit score, the range obviously is a large number. 640 for a credit score is generally the dividing line, where any number above 640 would be considered more of a prime credit score, and below that is subprime. So the higher your credit score, the more likely that you would be approved for a line of credit, assuming that other factors like your credit report and your credit application are in line with that credit score. Credit scores are generally more objective than looking at perhaps an application or even a credit report, because you're looking at a number. While it may be beneficial for some people or others, just seeing the number takes other factors out if you're ever concerned about why you may be denied credit. Which brings me to how it is calculated. The credit scores are calculated by the number and severity of late payments, this being the most important factor. So if you're concerned about your credit score or trying to rehabilitate it, get it higher, a great thing that you can do is really focus on making sure any payments that you have going forward are on time. And as Alan mentioned, any negative history, so previous late payments or delinquencies, you can assume that they will fall off eventually, 7 to 10 years, but that could be one of the main factors that's affecting your credit score currently. Other factors that go into calculating your credit score are the type, number, and age of accounts. If you're new to any lines of credit, maybe it's your first time taking out a credit card or any line of credit, you're going to have less history than someone who's been using a credit card for 20 years. The age of someone's credit history could contribute to a higher score, assuming that they were making on-time payments and using their credit in a way that they were paying back their lenders on time. Additionally, the credit score calculation takes into consideration your total amount of debt and your ratio to the balance of your credit limit. So someone who has a $5,000 credit limit and they max that out will look different than someone with a $10,000 credit limit and they spend $5,000. So even though it might be the same number, there will be, I guess, in your credit score, it will generally, you can expect they'll acknowledge how much of your balance you're using in addition to the actual amount that you're currently credit that you were lended and using. As Alan mentioned, credit applications and inquiries, back to your hard inquiries in particular, will affect your credit score. FICO has issued a statement, or I guess information, that a hard inquiry shouldn't affect your score for more than 5 points. But again, a lot of this statistical analysis and calculation depends on many factors. So a hard inquiry for your neighbor might have a different result on their credit report than it would for you. Finally, public record information, again, as Alan mentioned, like bankruptcies, or if you have litigation proceedings where you're owing a judgment, something like that can affect your credit score. Credit scores do not consider a variety of things, including race, religion, national origin, your sex, marital status, or age. It also doesn't include your salary, occupation, employment history. Now, specifically with salary and employment history, that doesn't mean that if you're applying for credit, that information doesn't matter, or your lender, potential lender, doesn't look into it. It just means that your credit score may not reflect your income coming in or your employment history. Additionally, it doesn't consider where you live, the number of inquiries into your credit, your soft pulls or the promotional inquiries where you receive something that says you're pre-approved. That doesn't go into your credit score, or any inquiries that a potential employer might use to evaluate your credit in order to, if you're looking for a job. So if you're looking to improve your credit score, generally you can expect that it can be updated once a month. That can change depending on your personal financial situation and the type of accounts and the frequency of accounts that you have currently for various lines of credit or a car loan, what have you. But you can expect that it'll change based on whether or not you make on-time payments, the type of credit or credit inquiries that you look into, or if you take out new lines of credit. Anything that might change your credit history or credit on your credit report could potentially impact your credit score based on the categories that we just went over. As I mentioned, the number one thing to be concerned about is making your payments on time. Another factor to consider, as Alan mentioned, is if you apply for credit, whether it's a credit card, a car loan, whatever it may be, if you're doing it frequently or more frequently than if you're maxing out and asking for more credit when you're being denied and you continue to do that, factors like that, adding hard inquiries to your credit report, are also going to affect your credit score. So if you can avoid frequent applications and rely on the existing credit that you have, that could also help improve your credit score. Additionally, whatever credit that you were given, so whether your limit is $5,000, $1,500, making sure that you're working within your credit limit, not exceeding it, not maxing it out. So if you're concerned about whether a high balance might be contributing to your credit score, a great action to take would be to work on bringing that balance down closer to zero. Additionally, if you have existing debt that you're trying to get down, sometimes either there's offers in the public, or you might hear or see on social media that you could apply to consolidate your credit or move a balance to a different card. And while those may work for some people, just something to keep in mind that doesn't necessarily mean that you will get a better credit score if you move your debt from credit card A to credit card B. It may help you in a debt payment strategy where, let's say, you get a lower interest rate on credit card B. It may help you pay that down more quickly, but it doesn't mean that moving that debt somewhere else will improve your credit score just by moving it. So now that we've talked about your credit score and what goes into it, we wanted to address what issues or how you can address any issues that you might be facing if you have debt right now. Obviously, your credit report and credit score is a reflection on the past, your past history, usually 7 to 10 years. But some people really are not ready to deal with that more so than just trying to get through, whether it's paycheck to paycheck, dealing with current debts that are facing them right now. And we just want to offer you some strategies in addressing that and any tips to ensure that you don't have to face any overwhelming financial situations based on accumulating debt. So number one, this happens to so many people. You are not alone if you have debt, whether it's credit card or otherwise, that sometimes it's a matter of, just overspending more than what you're bringing in your income. But of course, there's plenty of circumstances like, high medical bills. Of course, we know those can really rack up, or maybe you lost your job and you're dealing with trying to recuperate from that. So of course, that all these situations are stressful and can feel overwhelming, but we do have, there are options, and you're certainly not in this alone. And the best way to get started on tackling that is to make sure that you either develop a budget if you don't have one, or if you do have one, make sure that you're constantly examining that and really looking at what money you have coming in and what's going out. So your first step in developing a budget is making sure you're looking at your income from all sources, whether that's a job, if you have passive income from either an investment or maybe you have a side gig, whatever sources that you have, make sure you have that updated, and then take a look at what is going out. So fixed expenses and your variable expenses. Fixed expenses obviously being what you need. So if you have a mortgage or a rent, car payment, medical bills or prescriptions, anything that's fixed, obviously that is kind of a non-negotiable. And then working from there on keeping your variable expenses down, so that way you have enough income left over to pay down your debt. Additionally, just writing all that out usually can help you see the whole picture, prioritize whatever it is that you decide is going to be worth your money and worth also getting you to the financial freedom that comes with paying down your debt. With social media and obviously the internet, there are so many, resources, and you can, decide what you find trustworthy or what looks appealing to you or what might seem manageable. But there are plenty of like Excel spreadsheets or where templates that can really create the budget in a visual way that may be helpful for you. So if you ever struggle with figuring out like, how do I write this down? How do I do the math? There's a lot of resources out there that could help at least take care of that math part for you and really allow you to see where your money's coming and going. Other ways to deal with any debt, you can contact your creditors. So anyone that you have credit from, whether it's a credit card company, if you have outstanding medical bills or a car loan, if you contact them, explain why you're having problems in terms of making your payments on time, you may be able to negotiate a payment plan, possibly taking a couple months off of payments. Really the point in contacting your creditors is to avoid having a situation where your account is then given to collections. Certain companies may have different timelines in terms of how long they'll wait or how long they'll allow you to miss payments before they send it over to collections. But certainly contacting them and explaining what's going on is going to help, or more likely help you avoid that situation than just saying, I'm not going to pay and I'm just going to forget about it. So your own proactive response to that could really help protect your credit score and protect your credit report in the long run. Additionally, you can deal with debt collectors, and there's a lot of rights that you have as someone. If you are receiving calls or communications from debt collectors, they can't do anything and everything to get the money from you. They have to follow certain rules as well. And it's always good to be aware of what they can and can't do. And for example, debt collectors, which I guess I should specify. If you got a car loan from Ford, if Ford wants to call you to collect, that's a little different, but if someone else gets your account because it was not paid and it was turned over to a collection agency, these rules apply to them, which is they can't call you before 8 a.m. or after 9 p.m. They can't call you where you work if they know who your employer is. They cannot harass you, lie to you, or be abusive to you. If you send a written request that they stop contacting you, they have to honor it. If you dispute the debt that they're trying to collect from you in writing, they have to provide a validation of that debt to you. So while you may still owe them whatever it is that they're seeking, they can't do anything and everything to collect that from you. So just keep that in mind if you do face a situation where you're being contacted by a debt collector. Additionally, debt consolidation is a method which I touched on briefly. Whether that's if you have multiple credit cards and you just want to have one monthly payment, a lot of times there's, companies that may offer you a debt consolidation route where they will take all of your debt, put it in one account, and you just pay the debt consolidation agency. This can be an effective method for some people. The caution in using this approach is that sometimes, depending on the situation, the transfer of the debt doesn't necessarily mean that the person doesn't rack up new debt. So if you're already facing a situation, whether it's an overspending habit or just an ability to get control of your debt, when you use the consolidation, you just have to be mindful that you don't want to rack up new debt on the accounts that were just cleared by consolidating. Finally, your last resort option is bankruptcy. Bankruptcy, as Alan mentioned, it stays on your credit report for 10 years, and it can be a really big obstacle if you do file for it after the fact to obtain new credit or additional credit. And not just credit, but it can affect your ability to get insurance, or depending on the type of job or where you live, it can affect your ability to get a job. It is an option that can provide a fresh start, and certainly is, the best route for some people in some circumstances. But based on the long-term effects that come with it, being on your credit report for so long, it is generally what we would consider a last resort. I'm going to turn it back over to Alan to talk about avoiding scams and identity theft.
Great, thanks, Margaret. So as Margaret just laid out, there are all sorts of tools out there available to you if you're dealing with debt. That said, it's common when somebody is overwhelmed with debt to turn to a debt relief company, right? It seems very appealing to go to one place and you have this company telling you that you'll be debt free. You need to be really, really careful when working with debt relief companies. First and foremost, do your homework. Do a little research on the company before you sign anything or agree to anything. You can look up these debt relief companies at the Better Business Bureau, see if any complaints have been filed against them, look at their reviews. You can also reach out to your local consumer protection agency or the state's attorney general office to see, again, if any complaints have been filed, if there's anything going on, any investigations going on into those companies. Be very, very wary of advertisements that promise complete or total debt relief. Many of those companies, when they advertise that, really what they're doing is trying to sell you on bankruptcy. And as Margaret mentioned, and I mentioned earlier, that bankruptcy really should be your last nuclear option when there's no other options available to you, because it does stay on your credit report for up to a decade, and it really hinders your ability to obtain credit. It could hinder your ability to obtain housing, a place to live, or even employment. So it's something to certainly be wary of. And remember the old saying that I'm sure your mom or your dad maybe told you when you were younger. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't true. Shifting now to credit repair companies and scams. These have been proliferating a lot over the last 10 to 15 years. And typically credit repair companies will target folks with lower credit or no credit. And you'll see ads promising to, erase bad credit, guaranteed, remove bankruptcies, judgments, liens, bad loans from your credit file forever, create a new, legal identity. These all suggest that it's going to be a scam. And why do we know that? Well, as we've been talking about, there really is no quick and easy fix to bad credit. You can't just snap your fingers and make negative credit information go away. Instead, it's working to get more positive credit on your credit report to up that score. And again, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably isn't. I see we're running up against our time. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions, so I'm going to put a pin in something, and if there are no questions, I can come back to it. But I'm going to jump to identity theft. What's important with identity theft, and again, this is something that we could spend hours talking about, multiple panels, and I'm going to squeeze it into about 2 minutes. There are easy steps you can take to try and avoid identity theft, and then there are certain steps you can take if you believe that you're the victim of identity theft to try and remedy the situation. The easy steps to take is make sure you are regularly reviewing your account statements and your credit report. When you're looking at your account statements, so these could be your bank statements, your credit card statements, your auto loan statements, look for any suspicious charges or transactions, anything that you don't remember charging. And make sure you're receiving your monthly statements, whether they're over email or electronic or physical. Make sure you're receiving those regularly. If you're not receiving monthly statements on an open account that you're currently paying on, that could be a red flag that someone has stolen your identity and has now changed your address with that creditor. So something to keep an eye on. Reviewing your credit report, obviously very, very important. Look for accounts on your credit report that you may not recognize. If you've never purchased a car and you're looking at your credit report and you see that you purchased, 2 Porsches last week, well, that's going to be a giant red flag that someone may have compromised your identity and used it to purchase vehicles. And then make sure your personal information on your credit report is accurate. A lot of people, when you get your credit report, you fly past the personal information. You're looking at your accounts to see if they're current or negative, but make sure you look at your personal information. Make sure you recognize all the addresses that are listed on there. The names that you're associated with, that your date of birth is correct, your social is correct. Again, if any of those things are a little bit off, that could be a flag that your identity has been compromised. And then what happens if you think your identity has been compromised? What should you do? Well, place a fraud alert on your credit report. And you can do that by contacting the consumer reporting agencies, Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. Report to your creditors. You can submit, I know most banking apps nowadays and mobile apps, you have the ability to push a button and it'll freeze your credit card or it'll cancel it and order a new card. So take those steps if you think that you're the victim of fraud or identity theft as soon as possible. You could also file a report with the local police department, and you can file a fraud or an identity theft affidavit with the Federal Trade Commission, who handles these types of deals. We've got 10 minutes left, so I think we will open it up to questions. And it looks like, well, it's not really a question, but it looks like somebody validating a story where they went to speak with somebody about how to take care of a judgment, and the lawyer they spoke with was trying to sell them on bankruptcy. And that's, right on par with what I mentioned. Be very wary when you're talking to law firms or debt relief companies that are trying to sell you this pretty picture of, if we file this bankruptcy, you owe nothing to anybody, and life goes on and it's going to be great. Because it may wipe out some of your debts, but it's going to make it a lot harder to obtain credit in the future going forward.
Do you have any other questions?
Seeing no other questions, I know we've got a couple minutes left. It's probably not enough to cover the part I skipped over, but I just wanted to really briefly mention it. If you are going to talk to a credit repair company or credit repair organization, make sure you know what the Credit Repair Organizations Act is. And this is something that you can just Google. Like the name suggests, it regulates what credit repair companies, how they can operate, and most particularly how they can advertise to you and what they need to do when signing you up for their services. And just a couple examples of requirements. They can't charge you anything until they've performed the services. So if you go to see a credit repair organization and they say, don't worry, we'll take care of your credit, after you give me $500, that's a scam. That's a scam. That's an illegal organization. If you go to a credit organization that suggests that you create a new identity by getting a new federal employment identification number, red flag, that is illegal. You can't do that. So a lot of these things, again, it's common sense, but when you're in that situation and you're worried about your credit, sometimes common sense goes out the window. So make sure, you understand what that law says, even just from a broad overview, and understand that approaching a credit repair organization is something that you need to do. You need to be very wary of, and you need to do your homework before you proceed with any of those companies. We're just short of 5 minutes out. I will open it up again to questions or sharing if you have anything.
If anyone has any questions, please place in the chat box or the Q&A. Well, that's all we have time for this evening. Thanks so much to Alan and Margaret for such an informative presentation. And I want to thank the Evanston Public Library and Chicago Bar Association who helped put tonight's event. Our Law at the Library seminars are provided via Zoom monthly on various legal topics. Please share word among your networks and you can register for other law programs on the Chicago Library website. So thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Sharon. Have a good night, everyone.